facilitating the community sessions in Toronto to engage Black men and the community in dialogue on HIV vulnerabilities and collective resilience brought out fundamental aspects of the experiences of Black heterosexual men and the challenges with Black stereotypes in Ontario. The second episode of the weSpeak podcast will look at some of the insights generated from the sessions in Toronto. Hello, and thanks for joining us for the second edition of the podcast. I'm Joy Osiagwu, your host for the series. weSpeak is a 5-year program of research and related activities on the African, Caribbean, and Black ACB heterosexual men in Ontario to address their health needs, interests, and vulnerability to HIV. Our guests on this edition are Andre Harriot, one of the project's research assistants and a high school teacher. In addition, Brandon Hay, the founder of the Black Daddies Club, a forum created as a safe space for Black men to share ideas, struggles, and victories for effective network and support in Toronto, is a collaborator on the project. You will get to hear his commentary on the outcome of the weSpeak study. Andre Harriot commends the community-based participatory approach of the study. He describes it as one of the greatest successes of the project.
Honestly, it was such a great project to be on. I think for me, first and foremost, I really love community-oriented this project was, like really looking at, how do we support Black communities, really working alongside Black communities, not just going in to extract information and then just leave, but to really think about how do we support and work with Black communities along the way. And throughout the project, we were in the communities, we're going to barbershops, doing, outreach, getting Black men involved. And it was such a great experience, really getting to go inside and going to the communities and work alongside those men and women and people who are just supporting all the work that we're doing. And for me, I think what also stood out for me with this project was how critical the work was, right? It was really thinking about HIV prevention and Black men's health, but looking at other things like, Black masculinity and looking how Black masculinity informs Black men's vulnerability to HIV, thinking about heterosexuality and having Black men really think about what that means, right? What does it mean to identify as heterosexual? So having those conversations, looking at barriers such as anti-Black racism and how that affects Black men's access to healthcare. So normally, HIV research and conversation around, Black men's health, it's usually, just wear condoms, or Black men are reckless in their sexual endeavors, right? And really kind of like producing like these racist stereotypes around Black men. However, this project was really looking at the structural inequities and how that kind of disadvantages Black men in their access to, proper healthcare.
Reaching out to Black men and the community in their safe spaces, especially the barber's shop, was a significant attraction for Brandon Hay. The strategy resonates with his concept of Black Daddies Club.
One of the reasons that I was interested in working with weSpeak on this project and doing the barbershop series that we'll talk about was really the context of Black heterosexual men talking about HIV. And usually it's a taboo discussion and it's not talked about. And we thought the barbershop series worked because, we wanted to go for like some honest dialogues. I think it was important that we got the different honest conversations. And with that, we tried a bunch of different modules within the barbershop sessions. What I've learned over the 15th year working with Black fathers, it's not just that you build it and they will come. You have to build it and go with where they're at. And it has to be engaging. And it has to be relevant. We touched on conversation around honesty. And I think honesty is really important in the context of a barbershop.
The facilitators ensured that the sessions allowed participants to share personal experiences about structural inequities without reservations, as you will hear from Andre Harriot.
Like some of these conversations were very much taboo. So being able to enter a space where Black men can, disarm really and truly, because a lot of Black men spoke about navigating the real world, like having to wear, an armor really to get by because you're faced with so many challenges, right? You have anti-Black racism, you have unequal access to opportunities, etc., overcriminalization, heightened policing. There's so many challenges that Black men are navigating on a daily basis. So oftentimes Black men shared that they have to wear this armor. But I think that the really great thing about weSpeak is we looked at Black men not just as being oppressed, but the ways that Black men also resist stereotypes in their day-to-day activities in their day-to-day lives. So in terms of having a safe space, yeah, the Black men really appreciated it. After every event, we'd get thanked, they would thank us so much for really creating the space. And it was always we need more, how can we create more of these spaces? I never had this. So it was really a healing space for a lot of Black men to really come in and talk really and learn from each other in a space that was intergenerational, having Black men from all different ages and life experiences. So I think that was such a beautiful thing. And even myself as a Black man, I didn't really have that growing up. Wasn't until later on where I was able to develop a really close friendship with 4 Black men who are considered my best friends. And, we'd have these conversations amongst each other. But for me, I think it's important that, I get to have these conversations outside of my immediate friendships, but with other Black men who are living in this city.
Hay and Harriot say the conversations became intriguing as the barbers turned to co-facilitators because of their attachment to the customers, which made for more engaging and productive discussions about Black heterosexual men and HIV.
I've heard men say that they're more honest with their barbers than they are with their partners. And I think what that touches on is that barbers are traditional therapists for Black men, and the way we, and it speaks to that yearning as Black men we sort of need, especially in places like Canada, to speak honestly with other Black men. It's a little bit about why I was really intrigued and excited to take part.
The focus group sessions also revealed some of the vulnerable aspects of Black men.
Stereotypes were really, really big, this idea that men are not supposed to cry. And a lot of the men in our studies, from the youth to the adults to men later, older men, shared that they experienced this growing up, right? This pressure to be sexually active, have high sex drives from a young age, right? So there's pressure to prove that you're masculine. And a lot of youth, I remember, express that they're kind of discontent with this pressure. They express a desire to move beyond these stereotypes and find different ways of existing in the world, because oftentimes they found that trying to adhere to these stereotypes was devastating, right? Had negative effects. There are Black men who shared that they felt that some Black women expected them to perform these stereotypes and be strong as well. And that came up in our conversations in the barbershop talk, right? So it's kind of this push and pull, trying to navigate and negotiate those two things, where on one end they feel that it might not be serving them, but on the other end they feel that even sometimes women are expecting them to adhere to these stereotypes.
Could it be that these women expect this of men because of where they're coming from, the society in which they grew up?
Yeah, exactly. I would say 100%, because you even shared just now, you had that picture as well, the expectation that Black men or men are just we're always supposed to be strong, right? So this is something that the men expressed that they were socialized into, right? And there was no other they didn't have any other blueprints really. This was just all that they knew. That's all that they grew up knowing. So it was very difficult for sometimes for men to move outside of that. It was only until maybe they see other Black men who are moving differently and finding new ways to exist that they started to feel more comfortable in doing something different, right?
And I have a confession, even at this stage with the enlightenment I still do that to my husband. Brandon,
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I appreciate that honesty because I think, I think for me, what stood out in the barbershops was the sessions that were unisex and the sessions that were just men only. So I saw, in the sessions where there's unisex, you see how men police themselves. You also see, and what I mean by that is, on a general day in a barbershop where it's all men, the conversation could be flowing and it could be real. And then let's say a woman comes into the barbershop that's, let's say, the men find attractive. You can see there's a switching that happens. There's a performance, there's almost a mask wearing that comes on and off. So when you're in those spaces like the barbershops or with other men or other black men, for me, there's a bringing down of the mask that I have to wear outside in my daily job. It's outside in society, or sometimes even at home with one's partner or their children.
It's going to take the time to really unlearn some of those, those behaviors. But I think what's really important is that men are able to do this and they don't feel like they're being judged. So I think men are asking for spaces where they can be honest, be vulnerable, share their experiences, share their perspectives, and not fear judgment. And I think that's what was so beautiful about the Black men space only spaces, was that men felt comfortable, to express themselves. They knew that other Black men were kind of maybe struggling with some of these things or navigating some of these challenges as well. So they felt comfortable sharing. And there was no judgment. It was like, it was a judgment-free zone because we understand that we're all at different places in our learning journey.
They're willing to talk about the issue of HIV.
A lot of men thought it was an important conversation to be having, around sexual health, around HIV prevention in Black communities. And they were receptive to having that conversation because they knew what was important. So we had focus groups with Black men who were HIV positive, and they were able to express some of their challenges as Black men living with HIV, their challenges finding partners, their challenges accessing healthcare services, challenges with self-love. So we had spaces for them, and a lot of rich conversation came out of that. And I think in terms of having conversations around HIV and sexual health, yes, Black men were receptive and they wanted to have those conversations. I think oftentimes racist stereotypes depict Black men as I said, reckless, uninterested in sexual health, uninterested in health in general. But through our research, we learned that it's false. Black men are committed to, healthcare and to bettering their communities. They're committed to making a difference. And so they were open and receptive to the conversation. And they shared, they expressed their opinions. Some of them expressed some of their general misunderstandings. For example, a lot of men shared that, they had an idea that HIV was just something that happened among gay men, right? And they shared that it took them some time to really learn and understand that no, HIV is not just something that happens among gay men, but it can happen among all men of all sexualities.
One of the sessions we had focused on, we titled it HIV in Black Heterosexual Men, and that was probably out of the 3-day symposium, that was the lowest attended session. So we debriefed with the folks, the curators of the symposium, and we debriefed with weSpeak. And the learnings was that, you want to use maybe the themes.
Yes, stigma is huge, a huge issue that's still ongoing. And that was one of the things that we encountered as well, HIV stigma. And I think the men in the focus groups who were identified as HIV positive, they spoke directly to HIV stigma, having, like the struggles they experienced and how that kind of negatively impacted or presented challenges in their lives, right? Like they talk about, discrimination because of their HIV positive status. They spoke about having challenges finding loving partners and fearing like once they disclose their HIV status that they'll no longer have a partner, right? So a lot of men spoke about those challenges, and I think even in the focus groups for men who didn't identify as living with HIV, they also spoke about growing up with stigma in their families. Like, this was a taboo subject area. Again, it was this idea that HIV was only happened among gay men, and that kind of had resulted in them having a lot of misconceptions, or false ideas when it comes to HIV, and they acknowledge that kind of increased their vulnerability, right? Not having education, right? And a lot of men spoke as well about the importance of education from a young age, like increasing education around sexual health and HIV prevention in schools, because they thought that was important. And some men shared that they didn't get that education. And they talked about as well, like when doing that work of educating Black people around HIV, the importance of, doing it in ways that are culturally relevant as well, like, and incorporating education at different like cultural events, whether that might be, Afrofest, whether that might be a basketball game, just always in making sure that we're including an educational piece around sexual health and HIV prevention, so that we can work towards eliminating the stigma.
There's a need for more spaces for us to practice that vulnerability or being vulnerable with other Black men. And I think that work, because when we talk about self-love, we also have to talk about healing. And I think that's the part that we don't talk about as often, with the Black men, with anti-Black racism and this idea of mask wearing. What was under the stories of the Black men are saying was the countless amount of injury we as Black men face, and sometimes how we're depicted, or we face so much hate. And we so much that we internalize that hate when we see other folks that look like us. We have to heal that.
What should be the next steps from now on?
So again, continuing the conversation, making more of these spaces, more funding really given to organizations doing this work. I think in one of our conversations with like community partners, they expressed that, HIV prevention work in Black communities is not a hot topic when it comes to like policymakers. They don't give a lot of funding. They might give a lot of funding to like gun violence or violence in, communities and things like that. But when it comes to health research or health concerns among Black communities, it's not being addressed. So there needs to be more funding placed in that space, and so that organizations can continue doing the work. Also, Black men spoke about, not having more equal access to healthcare services. So for example, they spoke about when they go to healthcare services that do work around like HIV, they felt that they didn't feel welcome, like they didn't feel like they belonged, because mostly those organizations focused on white communities, and they didn't feel represented. They didn't feel safe. So there needs to be more HIV organizations that cater to, Black community members, so that Black people can feel comfortable and safe accessing healthcare services. Also education, people spoke about, increasing HIV awareness among Black communities, whether that's in schools or whether that's through events, just really spreading the knowledge so that we can go ahead and, work towards dismantling the stigma. We're very intentional about making sure that we continue to go back and engage community members, so that it didn't feel like just an exploitative kind of research project where we're just gathering information and that's it. So, we created like a log sheet of all the different Black organizations in the city, making sure we're always checking in, following up with them, thanking them for the work that they're doing, supporting their businesses. So, and going forward, I'm still thinking through like knowledge, like dissemination. So thinking about how do we share the findings with the community members. And the last phase of our project was actually inviting, community members and past participants back to the table to share the findings with them and to ask for their guidance as to how they think we should move forward with the findings, right? So that's just another example of how we continue to reach back and stay connected with the community members.
Black masculinities and structural determinants of HIV vulnerabilities are the themes of the third episode of the weSpeak podcast, featuring Dr. Rogers Antabe and Dr. Wesley Oakes. weSpeak research is funded by the Ontario HIV Treatment Network and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research.